I want to give all praise and glory to Yahweh Bahasham, Yahushai Bahasham Ha Rakah Kodash. Double honors unto our apostle elders, which rule Great Millstone Well, and Shalom to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel. Wa Abba Babal. Alright, so this is Mark 8, verse 22. And he, being Yahushai, cometh to Bethsaida, and they bring a blind man unto him, and besought him to touch him, so he would be healed, which this man is an Israelite man. And he took the blind man by the hand, and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes, and put his hand, let me read that again. And when he had spit on his eyes, and put his hands upon him, he asked him if he saw aught. And he looked up and said, I see men as trees walking. After that he put his hands again upon his eyes, and made him look up, and he was restored and saw every man clearly. So he did see men, but he said they looked like trees walking. All right. So what I want you to understand is who was in that land. All right. Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. And these men wore afros. All right. They would have an afro. This is why they would look like a tree walking. Do you see how a tree looks? Right. It's bushy on top and lean in the bottom. So this would have been what he saw. Right. Men walking around looking like trees, because they would have had what you know today as so-called afros. All right. Which they put up this false image and false name, which you know as so-called Jesus Christ, which really at the bottom you see the real image of that man, which was Cesar Borgia. All right. And they set up their image, the Edomite, the so-called white race. And this ain't the first time. They done it back in Egypt under Ptolemy, which you had Serapis. All right. Which this is the reincarnation of Serapis, which is Cesar Borgia. All right. And they pushed this false image of the so-called white man, and they set up the counterfeits in our land. Right. Which is a goddamn lie. This is why they're coming down with great wrath, knowing that they have but a short time. All right. Because they can't hide no more, because the light has come into the world. All right. And it's exposing the so-called white man, which is really the red devil the Bible speaks of. All right. Because how would these men look like trees? Right. When trees have lush afros. See, but it was that he saw a so-called black man with an afro. All right. Now look, I literally put, because I need Google to understand me, so I had to use the word black, but we are not black. All right, but I put so-called black men with afros like trees. Google it and look. This brother here looked like a palm tree. Right? This brother, look, the tree. See the tree on the back of this dude's head, which this ain't even a so-called black man, but it looked just like a tree. Was, you know, like his head has the bushiness of the tree. You see? This doesn't match a so-called white man's appearance. All right, look at this brother right here. Big old afro. Right? So this is what he's talking about right here. Men walking around looking like trees. All right? So that shows you, all right, who was in that land. All right? In that land was Judah, the so-called American Negro, Benjamin, the so-called West Indian, Levi, the so-called Haitians, all right, which make up the southern kingdom, which they were sieged in 70 AD by the Roman military under Vespasian and his son Titus. All right. The northern kingdom came to the Americas on Assyrian ships after the Assyrian Babylonian captivity. The southern kingdom went into the Assyrian Babylonian kingdom captivity 100 plus years. All right. About what was it, like 140, 150 years, 140 to 150 years later, they went into captivity under the Assyrian Babylonian, the southern kingdom. And then after the Medes, then the Persians, they came out, starting with Zerubbabel, and went back to Jerusalem to rebuild. And then eventually the Greeks and then the Romans ruled, which the Romans fell. All right. And then there was the Dark Ages, which Dark Ages was because dark-skinned men ruled. All right. And they're not black. You can see this brother here, he has so-called black hair. All right. But his skin is a brown. All right. There's no such thing as a black man. As you can see, all these men are dark-skinned, but none of them are so-called black. All right. Just like in this image, all these men are supposedly white, but look at their shirts. They have white collars, but they don't match because they're red. They're the red devil the Bible speaks of. Shalom to the elect of the nation of Israel, wa abal babal.